Likewise, only about half of native-born Hispanics between 25 and 65 are married, as opposed to something like 2/3 of non-Hispanic whites. Well, these are the kinds of problems that we're seeing with regard to the children of immigrants are often belie these claims of immigrant family values. You hear this all the time. Linda Chavez just harped on this in the previous panel. And the fact is that immigrants aren't some kind of supermen. They don't come and give us a morality shot when they arrive in the United States. They're regular people. They're experiencing the same stresses and the same temptations of modernity that cause illegitimacy to rise among Americans, and illegitimate births and lack of marriage and all these kind of things. It's just part of what happens in modern societies, part of the challenge that we have to deal with. They have to deal with the same thing as we do, and they're responding in the same ways through increasing rates of illegitimacy, decreasing rates of marriage. It's just, they're people. They're not supermen. They're not cutouts. They're not objects that we use as sort of allies to help us in the culture war. They're part of it, and if anything, they're more susceptible to the problems of modernity because they're going straight from the 19th century to the 21st overnight, as opposed to us and our ancestors who've kind of eased into a more permissive and modern society. But that's all about voting behavior. There's actually a voting behavior of immigrants. There's actually a second effect that immigration has that doesn't directly relate to what the immigrants do or what anybody else does about immigration. It's that immigration changes the political and social and economic environment in ways that make leftist, statist solutions more attractive to non-immigrant voters. I mean, the first thing immigrants do, and this is actually narrowly political, is that when every 10 years, when we do the census for purposes of reapportionment, they add a whole bunch of hard left Democratic seats to the House of Representatives and to the state legislatures. All people in the United States are counted in the census. Illegal aliens are counted. Legal immigrants who aren't citizens yet are counted. Long-term visitors, foreign students and foreign workers are counted in the census, and they have congressional representation. In other words, when they decide how to reapportion seats in Congress, they base it on how many warm bodies were counted. What that means is there are, in California, in the last census in 2000, California got 3 extra seats because of counting just illegal immigrants. Those seats did not go to Ed Royce or to Dana Rohrabacher or other conservatives. Those seats went to hard left Democrats. Maxine Waters, Javier Becerra. These are in what the old days in England they used to call rotten boroughs. They're districts with very few voters because so many of them are not citizens. Some are illegal, some are legal but they can't vote. Some are citizens and they're not interested in voting. So the number of votes that guys like leftist congressmen like Becerra or Maxine Waters, whose district is mostly Hispanic now, the number of votes they get is dramatically less than the number of votes a congressman in Iowa or Georgia or anywhere else gets. And there's this is true with the state legislatures too. No one's done work on this, I don't think. Jim may correct me. I'm pretty sure no one's done this. But my suspicion is that one of the reasons the Democrats are so dominant in the California legislature, which is the reason they've completely screwed their state up, is because there are so many extra seats in the legislature that went to leftists in Southern California because of the inclusion of immigrants in the census. But then there are other effects, other ways immigration changes the political environment that don't even directly relate to things like this. For instance, the uninsured problem. Democrats have been riding this for years, and they have made a persuasive case for a lot of voters that health insurance and the lack of insurance is a serious national problem because 45 million uninsured Americans, and then they change it to people, that demand action, and it's actually impelled it's given them political legs. It really is an issue that's gotten legs. Well, 1/3 of all people without health insurance in the United States are immigrants or their little kids living at home. The uninsured issue is an immigration issue. Not because most of them are uninsured, but 80% of the growth is from immigration. And it's half again bigger than it would be without immigration. So if the uninsured population were 30 million instead of 45 million, if it hadn't grown over the past 10 or 20 years by very much at all, then it just wouldn't be a persuasive argument. And this affects the voting behavior of Americans who aren't immigrants, who aren't thinking about immigration or immigrants, don't care one way or the other, and yet their behavior is changed dramatically and shifted to the left because of immigration. Likewise, income inequality is increased significantly, the gap between rich and poor, by immigration, both because of the importation of a lot of extra poor people, and then because of the reduction in the wages of poor Americans. So the gap between the rich and poor increases, and so some reasonably conscientious voter who could sort of vote either way is much more pushed to leftist, statist solutions to redistribute the wealth because they say, wow, this really is a problem. Ted Kennedy and Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Boxer, they're right. This really is an unequal society with growing inequality. So boy, it's against my better judgment, but I'm going to have to vote for, this left-winger in this next election. Immigration never even occurs to them, and yet immigration policy has influenced the way they vote. There's a couple other ways that immigration influences and pushes the political environment to the left that people don't think about. Immigration doesn't happen, doesn't spread out an inch thick across the whole country. As Jim showed, they concentrate in certain areas. By doing so, they're creating a much more densely populated regions. And the denser a population is, the more people living in the same space, the more government you need. This is the way it is. Just think about it. When you're looking for a parking space in a small town in Wyoming, you're not driving around the block a lot worrying about whether you're going to get a ticket and having to pay the parking meter. It's looser. There's fewer traffic lights, fewer stop signs, etc. The denser the population gets, the more you have to deal with it. More people is more friction, more conflicts, more regulation, more laws, more police, more government. Look at Wyoming, say, versus California. Wyoming is a very thinly populated state. California is a very densely populated state. Wyoming has a part-time legislature, very few permanent staff members for the legislators, easy access because there's a low ratio of lawmakers to constituents, so you're likely to run into your guy more often in the grocery store, be able to get access to him. California, permanent, full-time legislature, huge paid permanent staff, impossible to get any access to these people.